Hello and good evening, but more importantly, welcome back to Arsenal Analysed after a short break and an unfortunate end to the season. I know a lot of Arsenal fans were hoping for a bit of silverware in the form of a Premier League title, and that's why today I'm joined by two guests to break it all down. Did Arsenal bottle the league, or can we class it as a success? First up, we have regular, even though it's been a while for us all. Neil, how are we doing, my friend?
I am good, man. I am good. Happy to be back on. Happy to see you back on, bro.
Yes, too long
Yeah.
since we've done this, and it is something that will be a regular occurrence each and every Sunday for those regulars. So thank you very much for joining me this evening, Neil, or this afternoon over in the
Absolutely.
US. I know that's where you
Yes.
and Tony are joining me from. How are you this afternoon, Tony?
I mean, afternoon, morning, evening, it's pretty much all the same to me at this particular point. Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm happy to be back again, so I can't really thank you enough. I gotta say, I'm intimidated right now, man, because I'm looking at these two sexy individuals in front of me, and I'm seeing some powerful beard game going on, and I'm like, what happened here? It's all gone.
You'll have to get something
Bible pass
drawn
by.
on the next time we
So,
Go down to
we
the
go
rig store
live.
and,
So
and
you've
get a
got
beard and stick it on.
that's it. You've got till next Sunday. You've got till next Sunday to get it sorted out. You've got exactly 7 days. So some strong talking points for today. The reason why I wanted to leave it as long as I did for the season review is there were a lot of feelings over the last month, some more reactionary than others. So I just wanted everyone to have a nice bit of time to kind of really think about what the season has meant to them, whether or not they want to class it as successful or not. And it would be nice if anyone who is watching to get involved in the chat as well. I did see some messages earlier on from Stuart and Matt. For some reason, those comments have now disappeared. Not too sure why. Thank you very much for popping your comments in nice and early. But let's waste no more time at all and jump into the very first question of today's show. And I think a good place to start would be to take ourselves all the way back to last summer, which feels like such a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
That is the foundation that kickstarts the beginning of any campaign, and transfers are a big part of that. So coming to you first, Neil, Arsenal signed several players in the in the summer and the January transfer windows, and that did include Jesus, Zinchenko, Vieira, Marquinhos, Turner, Kivior, Jorginho, and Trossard. My question to you
Mm-hmm.
is to really kind of have a look at these players and judge whether or not any of those were a real success, what sort of impact those players may have had on the season. Could we class any of those as failures, and which of those players are maybe the jury still out on?
I'll start off with the jury being out on a few of these players here. I think the jury's still out on Saliba. I'm just joking. I had to start off by that. Marquinhos, because he's on loan, so we're yet to really see him be involved. I think the jury is surely out on Vieira. I think he's had quite a lot of time, quite a lot of game time to really make an impact, and he hasn't really.
Mm-hmm.
He did have that one goal that was a really good goal, but other than that, um, and as well as Turner. Turner didn't get many. We were out of a lot of cup games relatively sooner than we would have wanted to, and he's usually our cup goalkeeper. So that's where he would have had the opportunity to shine. So those are the players for me that the jury's still out on. I don't think Vieira is cut out really for England and English style, the English Premier League, because it's so physical, so quick, and it seems as if he needs that extra touch. Now, I could be wrong. He could get past that and become a dynamic player, but time will tell on him. Zinchenko and Jesus, they were very good signings. They both lack in specific areas, and now is not time to talk about that. But I feel as if they weren't the impactful players that we were hoping for them to be. Now, yes, we finished second. We were very close to capturing the league, But one of those two players I kind of have a microscope on, because I've noticed that, come 60 odd minutes, his mind tend to lose focus, and the defensive duties of that player has caught him out quite a few times and has
Yeah.
caused the opposition to either score and draw a game or cause us to be under immense pressure. My signing of both windows is Leandro Trossard.
Okay.
1 goal, 10 assists. Like, you can't ask for nothing better than that. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't, rate the assist, but without the ball getting to the finisher, he can't finish. So I think Trossard was a really, really good signing for us, and that's my signing of the entire season.
Good points made. And there's some that I do agree with, definitely, in terms of the impactful players. Trossard definitely being one of them, and Zinchenko and Jesus definitely lifted the squad. Different mentality compared to what we had previously. So some very, very good points made. Tony, what about yourself? Same question for you. It's always nice to hear different opinions on the same players.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I know that you had that section, you had it split up into the failure, the success, and then the one that the verdict is still out on.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to what Neil just finished saying, in my particular case, I'm not going to say that it's an outright failure just yet, but there were two players that I picked out. One of them was Vieira. In that particular case, it was more because of the physicality. He hasn't quite got the punch that we've been really, really requiring. It could still change potentially. I think that maybe with another season or so, under some more tutelage with Arteta, that could potentially wind up changing. That was the one that initially came to my mind first because of that. The other one that I had thought of, and again, I'm not going to be barking out against the players by calling them failures. But the other one that I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, obviously, he is not here right now, is Marquinhos because he is out on loan. He did get that. He got a single goal with our win over Zurich, and now he's been on loan at Norwich. So he hasn't really had a lot of time on the pitch with the first team to actually really shine through. I know originally that really wasn't the plan for him to be taking anyone's spot over, anyways. But because he had been out on loan, we haven't really been able to see the full potential of what he could actually be. Mm-hmm. And again, it's where I would have placed them under the failure category. But again, I don't consider them to be failures because things still change. And I think we've seen this happen before with one particular player. Well, I'm not going to be mentioning not just yet. As for the verdict, the verdict for me that's still on, it's because I've seen glimpses of what he is now capable of. And it's got me a little bit excited. It's going to be for Kiwior. Again, he came in not that long ago during the January window. And his primary purpose has been to fill in the defensive role.
Yeah.
At first, there were a couple of questions. Is he really going to be able to cut it in the league? How's the physicality? I think that with the last 3 matches, he's proven himself to be a very solid, very capable defender. So I'm excited to see what he can do in the future. Again, like I said, it's still relatively early to say how good he's gonna, how is he gonna be able to fill in the shoes. But I think it's a good possibility that he is going to be what we'll need, or at least he'll be a very solid substitute or a backup in case that we get another injury. Now, for my success, gosh, where do I start? There's multiples, starting from the last window all the way up to the transfers that we had in January. Gabriel Jesus, I don't really need to say anything. He's already proven it 100 times over. I know that he did have the injury during the World Cup, which set back quite a bit. I think had he been there for more of the matches, things could have definitely turned out a little bit different in the title race. But when he did return, again, he returned in relatively solid form. So I'm glad to see that he's going to be carrying this over into next season, hopefully. But for me, the standout player that I was left kind of in shock with at how well and how quickly he was able to adapt to was Leandro Trossard. Wow. So just some of the stats. Bear in mind, he came in during the January window, so he didn't have as many matches in his belt as some of the other players did. Saka actually had 11 assists this season, and he's been playing the entire season from the beginning. In Trossard's case, in his case, he came in during the January window, and in that time, he's managed to get 10 assists, which is it's an impressive thing.
Yeah.
And this is added with his own speed, the reflexes, and his ability to pick out his squad mates at the perfect position at the perfect time. I think he's going to adapt and is already adapting remarkably well to Arteta's system. So he's going to be one player that I think is going to be absolutely instrumental come next season.
Yeah, it's very difficult to look past Trossard as potentially signing of Arsenal's season just due to the impact that he had. And it just goes to show that signing players with Premier League experience over those like Mudryk, all banter and jokes aside about what hasn't happened for him at Chelsea and the price tag, but it just goes to show that sometimes the talent or the prospect of bringing someone like that in doesn't always necessarily work out, and bringing in someone like a Trossard who isn't necessarily, a big name or a shiny toy.
Yep.
He was having an impressive season at Brighton at the time. It just goes to show how much more you get from a signing like that. We only have to look at Liverpool and the signings that they've made from teams like Newcastle with Wijnaldum, Robertson, for example, bringing in that Premier League experience and how it's elevated them to the next level. And we could probably say the same for the likes of Zinchenko and Jesus, as Neil touched upon as well, bringing in that winning mentality that necessarily Arsenal didn't have in the squad at the time. A lot of hot prospects, a lot of players with a high ceiling, but having that mentality in the changing room makes such a big, big, big difference. And Chippy in the chat agreeing with you as well about Kivior. Looks like a very, very good player, squad player as well. Arsenal going to be involved in the Champions League next season, which is so nice to say. And we are going to need to rotate in other cup competitions. We are going to need to rotate at the weekend as well. And to have a player like him available at our disposal is going to be absolutely huge. So now that we've got the transfer window out of the way, as I said, that's kind of the foundation set for how a team might start the season. But the opinions for this next part is what's really kind of not only split the fan base. Some are suggesting that Arsenal haven't had a successful season because we haven't walked away with any trophies. Others have said that we bottled the league. Rival fans, for the sake of banter, are using it as a stick to beat us with, even though United lost in the FA Cup yesterday. Didn't want to have to bring that up. But the point is, I wanted to grab both of your opinions on this whole narrative that's being driven by rival fans, pundits, even some Arsenal fans. So I'm going to come to you first, Judge, as I went to Neil first last time. I just wanted to grab your thoughts on this whole narrative around Arsenal bottling the league, bottling the season, because some are saying that we put all our eggs in one basket, and forgot about the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup, the Europa League. Is it something that you agree with? What are your thoughts?
Oh, man. Give me 1 second. I'm going to need to knock one back real quick before I start answering this, because this is going to get serious.
It's going to get serious. That's what we want. We want hardcore opinions.
First of all, it took Man United exactly 15 seconds to pretty much hand the treble over Manchester City. So, but we're not going to get too much on that. Look, this is to me, it really came down to not just a mentality thing, but more like keeping, and I'm referring to the fans and the supporters and all that. This came down to keeping your mind focused on what the objectives were supposed to be from the start of the season, not based on what you were starting to see halfway into the season or anything like that. For me personally, and again, this is just my opinion. That's all it is. People are going to have their own opinion, and I respect that. But for me, our primary objective was, first of all, to get a top 4 spot so that we could qualify for the Champions League, either through a top 4 finish or through winning the Europa League. And that was the number one thing. It was to get that and to acquire the more of the Champions League position. Now, the reason that I disagree with the entire, the whole bottle job narrative, it comes down to a couple of different things when you really stop to think about it. And that is, over the past 3 seasons, where have we finished? We finished off in 8th place. Then we finished off in 8th place again.
Yep.
Then we finished off in 5th place last season. And where did we finish off this time? In 2nd place. And this was basically at the last minute, because we were in 1st place for the longest period of time. And the thing you have to remember is all the people that are calling, the club, the players, bottle jobs, if you would have asked those exact same fans, where would you see us at the end of the season? Would you have seen us competing against City all the way through to the end of the season? No. Nobody would have said that. The vast majority of these individuals, and you can check their tweets, you can check their, freaking social media, whatever. The vast majority of these individuals are saying that if we were lucky, we're going to wind up finishing 4th or 5th place again. Never in 1,000 years was anybody expecting us to do what we did this season with the young players that we have and the young manager that we have. Nobody would have ever thought that. And now look at where we are. Look at what we managed to accomplish. We're much higher, and you cannot deny that we are going up, because from going, 3 seasons ago to 8th place to 8th place to 5th, now to 2nd, and it's not just that, it's also the solid building block that we've managed to establish during the summer transfer window. Who did we get? What were the players that we managed to bring in? The number one was definitely Gabriel Jesus. We got Zinchenko, and now during the January window, who else did we manage to get that's going to be another top signing? We got Trossard, excellent signing. We have Jorginho, another solid signing, and we also have Kiwior, who we're still kind of waiting to see, but I think he's going to be a very solid individual. And then at the end of the season, you have to see we've developed such a solid play style. There's a couple of weaknesses in it yet.
Yes.
We have to be careful with some of the clubs, especially the ones that love to do low blocks. But other than that, we have a very solid play style. You could say we've got our arsenal back. And I mean, how long has it been since we were able to actually say that? And then not only that, but, for the individuals that are also thinking in terms of business and finance, guys, we just got over 150 million to spend, plus whatever else we managed to get during the coming summer window. And you can be sure that Edu, Arteta, Josh, they're going to be looking and learning from past errors and past successes and using that as a model to what we're going to need. We have the building blocks in the player. We have a solid core. We now need to continue to build on that. And it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, just a matter of when.
It really is, and I really hope it is a case of when. But you do make some absolutely fantastic points about this Arsenal team. What a lot of people do need to realise is that this is the second youngest team in the Premier League, and we went toe-to-toe with what is being argued the greatest ever Premier League team up until the last 2 or 3 games. So to call Arsenal a bottle job based on just some of that, without all the other facts, figures, and records that we've broken and God knows whatever else.
You keep saying that word. Keep saying that word. You're going to have me drunk by the end of the show.
Neil, I need to hear your thoughts and opinions. Same question to you, my friend, about this whole bottle job narrative. What do you think?
I mean, it's a narrative. That's all it is. It's made for people to click on it. It's made for people to read it. It's made for people to listen to the podcast. It's giving a reason the opposition to have something to talk about, because we bottled it by 6 points. 6 points. Truth be told, I watch a lot of sport, not just football. And right now we're in the NBA championship finals going on, and I root for the Miami Heat. Miami Heat had to get into playing into the Eastern Conference through a play-in tournament. They didn't automatically qualify, and I'll make my point soon. They're now the 8th seed of the Eastern Conference. They managed to beat the number 1 seed, which was the Milwaukee Bucks, in 4 games to 1. They managed to move on and beat the New York Giants. I think that went 4-2 or something like that. And now they're in the finals and they're playing. No, and we had to go and actually beat the Boston Celtics. And if you know the Boston Celtics, it's loaded with a lot of talent. All I'm saying is this. The number one seed has a player by the name of Giannis Antetokounmpo, and forgive me if I mispronounce that. The journalist asked him, "Do you see this as a failure? Do you see the season as a failure?" And I don't know what held him back, but he wanted to jump off the stage and attack this journalist. Why push that narrative, not that narrative of as a season as failure? And he was so right. It's in some light, you didn't attain the goal, so maybe it is a failure. But the way that or the way how fans like to compound the word failure and the whole feeling behind it, as if it's like everything is all done. There's nothing coming back from it. It's dead, and it's wrong because this is not a season of success. This is not a season of failure. This is a season of progress. We progressed from 8th place, 5th place, and now 2nd. Behind City by 5 points. We could have won the league by winning 2 more games, which we could have done, but we fell off. So, with everything that Tony said, he's absolutely right. You have to look at sport now, especially where there's so much technology involved, so much money involved. Players are able to play longer because of all this type of new technology, and the way how Manchester City has invested is not a shock that they're in line to win the treble. They're a very good team with a very, very good, arguably one of the best managers in history.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to think about. And look at the contrast of Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola. It's black and white. The experience, the knowledge versus the apprentice, as they like to call him.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not an apprentice anymore. He's how many seasons deep now? 4 seasons deep?
Yeah,
3 seasons deep.
So, so he has some experience, but still the experience that Pep has in knowing how to push on at specific points in the season is where the clutch really happens with specific type of players. No one saw Gundogan having the season that he had, but he was their clutch player numerous times, and that's what I feel our team lacks. We lack that clutch player. We have phenomenal players, but we lack that clutch player, that player to really, as they like to say, grab the game by the scruff of the neck and really go with it. So in my opinion, the season was progress.
It was progress as well, and we have to understand that we're up against a very well-oiled machine in a team that has been in progress for 6 or 7 years. Somewhat the finished article, if you will, the pinnacle of what City have been working towards, what Pep Guardiola has been working towards with this City team. And when you look at the players that they have, a lot of them are either, in the prime of their careers, or some of them the best players in the world in their positions. So the fact that we went toe-to-toe with them, with such a young Arsenal side, really does speak volumes. And you make some fantastic points in there. We really, really, really do. One thing I did want to ask you about as well, just before we go to the comment section, is, there was a part of the season where things, I wouldn't want to say fell apart or went wrong, but for the purpose of asking the question, Neil, at what part in the season do you feel it started to fall apart? What was the catalyst behind Arsenal season going wrong, I suppose, is one way to put it. I don't like to put it like that, but it's the only way to ask the question.
Which one of us can go first?
Neil.
Okay. So for me, I think it snowballed. I think it snowballed from the Liverpool draw.
Okay.
And I don't want to. This is not let me quick disclaimer. This is not me getting down on a player. This is me making an observation. Throughout the entire season, Zinchenko has been good for 60 plus minutes, 60, 62 minutes. And we didn't learn from that because we had too many this season. I think we can all agree that we had too many reasons to have to score last minute winners. We should have been able to tie up a lot of games during the season without having to force and come back and scrape and get a goal. That being said, Zinchenko allowed Trent Alexander-Arnold to make that cross in, and bound to score, Bobby Firmino scores his looping header. For me, that is where the entire season really and truly started to snowball into the inconsistent games. Yes, that went on to 3 draws because we then
Yeah.
went on and drew against West Ham, and then we drew against Southampton, um, which, truth be told, the West Ham game should have been won. Why they came back into the game, how they came back into the game, God alone knows. You know, the Southampton draw at home, another one that should have never happened. We should not be allowing 3 goals in like that. Was it Southampton that we? Yes, it was Southampton
Yeah, it
because
was Southampton.
they
Yeah.
yet to win at the Emirates. So you know it's a lot of, and again it's in that on that left hand side where is it now? I know he adds to our attack, he does, but he takes away from the defense, and the defensive duties is what wins the championship. Defenses win you championship, strikers win games. That's just how it is, and that's where we fell apart this season. Our defense fell apart eventually, with eventually when Saliba got injured and couldn't, it just didn't work out for us. So for me, it all came from the Liverpool draw.
Okay, Tony, I don't want to put my opinion on this just yet, but Tony, what do you think? I know we don't necessarily, we're not negative on this channel, but we have to talk about these things. What are your thoughts on where and when and how it went wrong?
Yeah. It was pretty much, I think Neil just he hit that right on the head. Just one thing that I did want to touch up on is okay, yeah, for me it definitely did happen, just like Neil said, it happened during the Liverpool match. At the very beginning, that first half, we essentially, at least for the first 20 minutes or so, we had solid control of that match.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate because there's a couple of things. Yes, Zinchenko, absolutely, he did make a mistake, and it's not the first time that he's made a defensive error, which has allowed someone to slip past and then make a play that would eventually lead to a goal. There was that. There was also, to a certain degree, the little scuffle that Xhaka had with, I forgot who it was, that sort of started rallying. That kind of started rallying Anfield to a certain degree. You poked the hornet's nest, essentially. That's what it was. Yeah, it really. There's a couple of other inconsistencies also that happened during the last 3 matches of the season, but I think where we were dealt that really tough blow that sort of kind of flattened the wheels a little bit, I think it was at Anfield, and it was a draw. Because realistically, that was a match that we should have won. We really should have. But unfortunately, it's those defensive lapses and that laxity that allowed 2 additional goals. And it was really unfortunate because from that, and this is the other point that I was about to try to make here, is the fact that I saw some glimpses of the inconsistencies in the performances that haunted us in past seasons and led to less than stellar performances. We did see it. I saw it right at that particular blip. So because we had that draw, we had 2 draws, and then the loss at City, followed by the 2 wins, and then that other blip, that other inconsistency again, which I was really hoping not to see, and we should not have. Those are matches that we should not have lost, especially to that one at Southampton. That was a shocker.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I think that really was where things just kind of deflated a little bit, where we And I think personally, besides the defensive mistakes, there's a certain killer instinct or ruthless mentality that we need to solidify when we are going up against opponents, because I think that we're too respectful sometimes and we need to go for the throat. I mean, if we could destroy an opponent 4-0, 5-0, that's kind of what we have to do, because we need to toughen up mentally in that sense, I think.
Yeah, I do agree, and I think that definitely comes with experience, and you can see that when you look at Arsenal in the previous season, and I don't like to talk about it, but when we fumbled things for qualification for the Champions League in the previous season, and it seems as though the younger players have learnt from that experience and gone, one step further this year. So, it makes you think that, we fumbled it this year. What does that mean next year in terms of the experience that these players have? But you guys are both absolutely spot on in terms of, the when and the how, looking at those games and what we could have done differently, the turning points in those games, whether it's allowing West Ham back in when we shouldn't have done, we should have closed the game out, whether it's looking at the Liverpool game and Zinchenko maybe playing in a position that he shouldn't have done, he shouldn't have been more advanced, or Granit Xhaka riling up Anfield. But from a tactical point of view, I think the big, for me personally, from a because it's something we haven't touched upon, the tactical side of things, is squad depth. And Chippy does mention it in the chat. Why that's such a big thing is when you look at when Saliba gets injured in the season, all of those games that we've just discussed, he didn't feature in those games. And from a tactical point of view, as soon as Saliba got injured, when we look at who came in initially, which was Rob Holding, with all due respect to him, I'm not trying to diss Rob Holding or anything like that, but Arsenal automatically defend 5 to 10 yards deeper compared to where we defended in the first 2/3 of the season, which invites far more pressure. The physicality and pace that Saliba has, it fills that back line with so much more confidence. And when you've got an Antonio, an absolute physical specimen who bullied our defence at times when we played West Ham, likewise when we went to Liverpool as well, it sets up such a different precedence in the game, a different tone. It's all about how you press on the front foot. If you're defending 5 to 10 yards deeper, that press at the front isn't as intense because you've got to make those yards up behind you. So I think squad depth, and from a tactical point of view, next season, when you look at some of the players that we're being linked with at the moment at the back, and we'll talk about this in next week's podcast as well, about how Arsenal are going to look to strengthen their team and bring certain players in with the budget that they have. But I think squad depth is absolutely huge to bring someone in. When you look at the impact Thomas Partey being injured in last season had on this squad, and Tomiyasu and Kieran Tierney, and how we didn't have the right fullbacks to fit in tactically to what Arteta wanted to do, and how much of an impact that had last season and how much of an impact it's had this season because of squad depth. So I think that's going to be an absolute huge part of what Arteta wants to write this upcoming window, and hopefully go one step further. Ending this kind of section about the season as whether or not Arsenal bottled it or not, looking at the positives, coming to you first this time, Judge. I just wanted to grab your thoughts on what were the successes of Arsenal's season, and should we be looking at it as more of a success as opposed to a failure?
Yeah, again, this kind of harkens back to some of the points that I had made previously. It's, once again, you really need to just kind of sit back and look at, pushing the whole title race to the side, where we ended and how we ended. Yeah, it wasn't disappointing that we weren't able to secure the title. Sure, it was. Of course, we wanted to get that. But again, I think that for the youth of our squad and what we should have been aiming for from the very beginning, which again was a top 4 and then the Champions League qualification, we did that resoundingly with a massive amount of points. And not only that, the reason that I still see this season as a success is because of where we ended in comparison to our past seasons. I mean, we were all the way to the very, very end. We were going up against Manchester City, probably one of, if not the best Premier League team that we've seen so far. And we actually made them fight and sweat all the way to the very end. No other club was able to get anywhere near to what we were capable of doing. In addition, again, the signings that we've made thus far, they've provided us with such a style, such an identity, and such a solid core block of players that this is where we're going to continue to build up on. And we could literally make an entire show just out of that right now. But due to the time limit, obviously not. But to me, again, it's, we've really solidified our playing style. And not only that, but I think probably besides, the massive amount of money that we got, over 150 million, I think the most important thing that we actually got from this season, besides the players themselves, it was the experience that we got. The players are going to remember what happened this season. They're going to know what it feels like to work so hard and then, just to kind of have it drop out of your hands during the final couple of matches. And I think this is going to be a very powerful motivator coming into next season as well. But I think it really bottles down to the experience that the players have gotten from this. They're going to be much, much tighter as a unit. Arteta is going to refine his playing style. He's going to learn from the errors and hopefully apply that to next season. So again, and with 100% respect to everybody else's opinions, to me, this was not a failure. This was an excellent learning opportunity. This was an excellent experience for the players to really mesh together as a squad. And there's a lot of positive things that we can continue to talk about to take from, to take out of the season. But I don't want to steal Neil's thunder, so you go for it now.
Neil, with plenty of time to think about your positives or the reason why this season was a success, what do you think? What's your opinion on it all?
Not to try to piggyback off of what Tony just said, but he's right. The most valuable thing that came out of this season was the experience that the players got. That's it. They now have something to go back to, and in the upcoming season, they can then go back to this season and say, you know what, at this game, I remember feeling this way at this specific moment, and it ended up having serious repercussions. And those are the type of feelings that gives you that extra push to go on and really, do something that is substantial. Sometimes it's an extra yard. Don't give that player that extra yard, and they don't get that opportunity to cross the ball in, and it's the fine margins, as Peter Drury likes to put it, the fine margins. It comes down to that. Now with this experience, they have that on their, under their belt. I really hope that they're looking forward to next season. I hope that they're excited. Yeah. I hope that the players have a new sense of yearning to want to go out there and play. I feel like, that they need to also know that they were extremely good to do what they did this season. The drop-off from second was, 19 points, 18 points? That's a huge drop-off to be able to keep up with City and what City has. So I hope the boys can, really, really hold their heads high, take in the experience that they got, and really, push on and get excited for next season. Have that fire in your belly, like you have unfinished business. Yep. That's what it is. You have unfinished business, and you take care of business coming in next season.
Absolutely, and some of the players have already started talking about the fact that they can't wait for next season to start, and this one's only just finished. So I do think that you're both absolutely spot on with the whole experience and how it builds, character, and really kind of pushes that mentality to go one step further, given how close they
not just for
were.
Players, but for Mikel Arteta and his
absolutely.
Team as well.
Absolutely spot on, to Arteta and his coaching team, because a lot of those guys, that will have been the first title race that they've been involved in, as well. And apart from the obvious, which in terms of positives, that is that Arsenal got Champions League qualification, whether it was finishing second or fourth we have to look at all of the records that Arsenal broke last year as a club, not necessarily in the Premier League, but Arsenal finished with the second most points for in the Premier League in their history. You know, the only time that Arsenal have had more points in a Premier League campaign was when we went unbeaten, when we went invincible. Arsenal scored 88 goals last season, the most goals that Arsenal have ever scored in any Premier League campaign ever. Arsenal also finished with 4 players with 10 plus goals. No other club in Europe done that. No other club in Europe had 4 players with double figures. And I could go on. You know, we broke the record for most London derby wins. You know, there are so many positives to come out of this particular campaign and build upon. Tony?
Yeah, and actually one really interesting, this is because another interesting stat that I actually found was on Trossard. He actually became the first player in Premier League history to get 3 assists before halftime in an away match. Not only that, too, but also Arsenal, we were the only side to have 3 players with 20-plus goals and assists, and those all came from Saka, Odegaard, and Martinelli between the goals and the assists. So that's so solid because it tells you the hunger and the mentality that the players already have. This was just for this season. It's just going to continue to grow going into next season.
Yeah, I agree completely. And you boys know I love my stats. I love my analysis and stuff like that. And, you know, if any of the regulars have seen any of my previous videos, I bring up records, I bring up stats, I bring these things up. So if any gremlins in the chat who want to watch this video and say, oh, yeah, records and stats don't win you trophies and titles, it's something to build upon.
They do.
Let me tell you, it is something to build upon because City have got enough of their own records and stats. Like De Bruyne is top for goals scored from midfield, which Odegaard equaled this season. So, you know, these players are in good company. These things don't happen by accident. The quality is there. But moving on to our next question. This one is going to be an interesting one because hindsight is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And apart from the obvious, and I'm going to come to you first, Judge, apart from the obvious, which would be winning the title, if you could go back and change one thing from last season, what would it be?
You know, I had to think about this one because it all kind of brought me back to what happened at Liverpool. But it wasn't at Liverpool. It was before then when we were playing in the Europa League against Sporting Lisbon. I actually, had I known that this was going to have such an impact, I would not have played Saliba or Tommy because we lost both. We lost both because of that. And Lisbon, they were not kind at all. They were extremely physical against us. And I could see that from a mile away. To be honest, I cannot even begin to pronounce in Spanish and English all the wonderful words that were leaving. I was seeing and reacting to all the tackles that were basically just kind of being ignored. You know, it's one of those where I would have rotated the players for that one. I know what we were playing for. I know the importance of it. But again, like I said, hindsight's a wonderful thing. So had I known then what we know now, I would not have allowed either of the two of them. Because unfortunately, Tomiyasu was also a big miss for us this season too. We missed him quite a lot. So I think, honestly, if we could have had both of them still in the squad when we went back to the Premier League, I think it could have been very different because it was right after that match that we had to go up to Liverpool and we kind of took that dip. And I know for sure that at the very least, Saliba had his absence had a big part to play in what happened.
It did. It really, really, really did. We only have to look at the previous season. Had, say, Tomiyasu been fit and Saliba not, you know, Ben White played at centre-back alongside Gabriel. So there's that whole kind of rotation between, you know, does Tomiyasu play centre-back? Does Ben White? Does Tommy, you know, there's options. There's options in that depth. But to have both players get injured in the same game, it's absolutely horrible. Neil, hindsight, talk to me, my friend. What would you change?
It's like Tony was in my head and he pulled it out. It's exactly that. But it's the one thing that I would have changed thinking about what Tony said there. I wished we went harder in the summer window, not January, summer window.
Okay.
bringing in players that we really wanted. And I know there's a lot of things that goes on when it comes to signing a player, but I feel as if had we pushed a little bit harder, looked a little bit harder, and tried to find diamonds in the rough, we would have had some depth that would have forced Mikel's hand in creating some rotation, and by extension, Saliba, Tomiyasu, a bunch of players who should not be playing, and in certain games during the course of the season would not be playing. Saka is one of them. Gabriel Martinelli is another. They've seen a lot of football this season. So, I think that's something that needs to have some focus. We need to have some focus on squad depth. And I think that's the one thing that I would change about last season. The beginning.
It's a very, very good point, because not only in the season just gone, but the season prior, which we have touched upon, squad depth is the common theme as to why Arsenal have lost out on their goals. And although going for the title this season wasn't the initial goal, because it was something that happened during the course of the season, we have to look at something like squad depth as a reason as to why things didn't work out as best they could have potentially worked out. So I really do hope, like you said, that the board and Arteta have got one eye on addressing things like the striker position, the right wing position. Midfield needs depth. It's all well and good having these bodies in these areas, but another thing for me as well is the drop off in quality in the replacements that come in. Hence why someone like Sambi Lokonga went out on loan, because he wasn't quite right. He needed the experience, but that's a conversation for another show altogether in terms of players coming and going. But two very, very good points, similar in what you've said. Two questions left before we finish off today's show. So if you are enjoying the show, do go ahead and smash a like. It is much, much appreciated. Subscribe if you're new around here. And I really do appreciate that everyone who has come along to watch live, and for those who watch this back as a video too. So first of the last two questions, Neil, I'm going to come to you first this time. I want to hear more about who you thought Arsenal's surprise package was this season. Both, so two players. I want your surprise package for good reasons, and then I want your surprise package in terms of someone that didn't perform as well as you thought they might. Or maybe a prospect that you thought might play well or something like that, but it didn't. So two players, hit me with them and tell me why.
My surprise package this season, Granit Xhaka. Professor Snape, a.k.a. Professor Snape. Our very own dabbler of the dark arts. He surprised. He really sorry. He really surprised me this season with the amount of goals, the new position he took up, the way he he just grabbed onto it and he just ran with it. This new role, the goals, the assists, the energy, the leadership that he brought to the team this season. A lot of people wonder why, he's leaving, but it's time for him to leave. We can't be attached to players. But he has been he was such a surprise. He was a breath of fresh air, more than the new signings that we had, and he was like a brand new signing,
Yeah, with the way he played in the position he played in.
Yeah. So, in terms of disappointment,
it's tough, who didn't live up to expectation.
It is. It's actually very close between, as I think about it, it's very close to Zinchenko and Aaron Ramsdale. And let me tell you why.
Okay. Wasn't expecting that.
I know, and he's been a phenomenal goalkeeper, but there was some moments in the season where he should have saved some very, very, to me, what seemed simple. I mean, it's hindsight. So we're looking from afar. I'm looking on a TV screen across the pond. But, you know, goals that could have been saved, he didn't. And I feel like he went too acrobatically or with the flash versus keeping it simple and just keeping the ball out the net. Zinchenko, for me, I want to see him do better defensively, even though that might not be the reason why he's at the club, but he's playing in an inverted left back position.
Yeah.
He advances and takes the ball forward, which is great. But you know that lapse in concentration happens, and it keeps happening. And if he were to address that, you're looking at a completely different player, a lot of different outcomes in the season. So there you have it.
Okay. No, interesting choices. I'm not going to say anything yet about players. I don't want to take anything away from.
Come on, James.
I've got a list of players that we could potentially talk about. See, so I don't want to list them all.
Jesus Christ, Jake,
and then yes, I've got a list. Tony, talk to me first, and then I'll go through my list.
Yeah, so starting with the surprise package player, it really was a surprise to me too, but it was for Saliba. Yeah, for me he was. To be honest, I think he really was one of the main reasons for why we got as far as we did. It's his ability to push up the pitch, with his physical prowess, his speed, his skill, and especially where I think which is the biggest difference maker is his 1v1 defending. He's top quality. I would never have expected him to adapt the way that he did, as fast as he did, and with the amount of skill that he did. And it just comes to show you what happened after his injury. The dip that we took. He was beyond fantastic, and this, coming off the heels of essentially what was a little bit of a controversy surrounding him prior to all of this, and he came back to the squad, was welcomed with relatively open arms by the supporters, and it showed. He was absolutely defining player defensively for us, and is again we miss him terribly, and it's a shame that his injury came at the time when it did, because if it would have come in maybe a little bit later, not that I would have ever wanted him to get injured, but I think if it would have come in maybe just a little bit later, within like the last 3 matches, I think we could have had a firmer grip on the title.
Yeah.
But regardless, he has been absolutely spectacular, and I can't wait to see how much better he's going to wind up getting in the seasons to come. So he was definitely my surprise package, in a positive way. I don't want to say disappointment, because it's not really in my nature to be overly critical of players.
Well, but if I didn't live up to expectations.
Yeah, we're gonna just put it like that instead. Yeah. Soften the blow for me, thank you. I actually chose Tomiyasu now.
Okay.
Okay, he did prove his versatility to Arteta still, especially across the back line with his defending. We know this because we've seen what he's capable of, doing. But unfortunately, in this particular case, it was the injuries that led him to have a lackluster season. We'll just put it like that. He wasn't quite able to get away from that. So again, it's not that it was that he was a disappointment, because we've seen what he could do. It's just that his season wasn't as solid as it could have been.
Yeah.
And again, this is due to the injuries. But because of the injuries, there's a certain drop off in your physicality. You get a little bit rusty because you're not practicing as often as you would be. But I still think that Tomiyasu, he's going to bounce back. He's going to recover relatively fast, I believe, anyway. So I'm still looking forward to seeing what he's going to wind up doing next season.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Tomiyasu is an interesting one that you bring up, actually, because I think next season will be his last season to prove his worth to this squad. And I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to signing for Arsenal, I don't think his injury record was too bad. And since signing for Arsenal now, at the back end of both seasons, he's had injuries that have written off his season at really, really important times. And it's just whether or not you can continue, working with a player like that. And, you can see now why Ben White was moved out to right back. and why we signed Zinchenko. A lot of people were saying, if Kieran Tierney can stay fit, he's a quality player, he's a future captain, then we signed Zinchenko. Now he's on the peripheral of the squad. So yeah, Tomiyasu's definitely an interesting one. My list of players, I say list of players, it's not as bad as it sounds. In terms of disappointments for me, or players that didn't live up to expectation, the obvious one for me is Thomas Partey. Chippy mentions him in the chat. Now, whilst there were games this season where he was absolutely outstanding, and in the first half of the season there were Arsenal fans suggesting that he was the best defensive midfield player in Europe based on form. Yeah, I probably would agree with that at times. But for me now, over the last 2 seasons, what has really kind of put a question mark over his name is consistency over the course of a season in terms of dropping those 7 and 8s out of 10s every single game, which is what we need if we're going to push for a title. And it's to no surprise that we're being linked with players like Declan Rice and Caicedo, who would effectively play in his role. So for me, it was Thomas Partey. In terms of players that surprised me, there's quite a few actually. Granit Xhaka's the obvious one. Ben White is another one at right back. A lot of people didn't know if he was going to play as well as he did at right back. I think Martinelli and Odegaard, for me, surprised me in the sense of how many goals they scored. Whilst everyone knew that Martinelli has and had the potential to be a great player, it was always a case of, right, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Is it going to be this season? Is it going to be next season? And obviously we were pleasantly surprised. And likewise with Martin Odegaard, who prior to this year hasn't been a prolific goal scorer for midfield for any of the clubs that he's played for, to my knowledge. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But for him to go on and do what he's done in midfield, the way he's done it, I was very, very surprised. So pleasantly surprised, of course. So I'm sure we could sit here and talk about players all season long. And Saliba, like you said, Tony, nobody knew that he was going to slot in and have the impact that he had. If anything, I thought it was going to be a slow transition, if I'm being honest with you. But boy, did he have an impact on this squad. So okie dokie. So this brings us to our last question of today's live show. Tony, I'm going to come to you first before we finish with Neil. And it's going to be ending on a positive, which is nice. Who was your player of the season? Arsenal player of the season, of course. And why?
What, you really thought I was going to say Harry Kane? Come on, man.
Oh, God.
No. I'm sure I'm going to be catching some shtick and some hate mail, but I chose this player specifically not because of his technical prowess, but because of the turnaround that I saw in this player. And I'm pretty sure you guys already know exactly who I'm going to go for. For Granit Xhaka, wow. That really is all I can say. Now, I actually have a couple of stats for him from this season compared to some previous seasons, but he played in 37 matches. In those matches, he got 7 goals, 7 assists, 5 yellows, no red cards. So those are decent stats, especially when you consider the fact that in the last 3 seasons combined, he had only 1 goal in each season and 2 assists and nearly double the amount of yellow cards, which shows what a massive disciplinary improvement he's had besides technical prowess, at least in this particular season. Again, I didn't choose him at all, though, because of the technical skills and the prowess that I just mentioned. The reason was because he's essentially been almost a redemption story arc to a certain point. It almost was like a Disney movie to a certain degree here. Yes. It was he essentially went from a player that was basically throwing his armband down on the pitch to becoming a very influential and natural leader on the pitch that the younger players were looking to for the experience. And it really was a beautiful thing to see this transition. And like I said, it's just unfortunate that that this particular transformation, which has been coming, but it just took all the way up to what's probably going to wind up being his last season at Arsenal for it to come to full fruition. And I just think that it really took Arteta. It took the correct manager to bring out the best in him. And when you have an excellent manager like Arteta, he will do this with players. He will take players that are sort of in the rough, and he'll turn them around. He'll make them into complete diamonds. And for me, Xhaka was, my God, he was beautiful. I mean, he was absolutely excellent this season. I would have liked for him to stay one more season to continue to share that experience with the rest of the younger players and to see how much further he could have improved. But when it is your time to go, it's kind of your time to move on. So I still wish nothing but the absolute best for him if he decides to move on, which will probably happen regardless of what club he decides to go to, except if it's Tottenham. If it's Tottenham, I hope he bombs over
there. No, he makes some very, very good points on Granit Xhaka, and I think him leaving this season is best, because I think in his head as well, he's never going to have a better season at Arsenal, and he's not going to have a better opportunity to sign off in such a positive way. Obviously, winning the Premier League would have been the ideal scenario, but yeah, in terms of how he's ended the campaign and what he's done this year, there's not a better way really for him to sign off. And it is a shame, because he's described as a top professional off the pitch, and he's a leader off the pitch as well. So be interesting to see how that personality is replaced in the dressing room should he leave, if rumours are true. Neil, who is your Arsenal player of the season and why?
Again, Tony snuck into my head. It's hard not to choose Granit Xhaka. Only because we all know the history of him being at the club.
Yeah.
But let me change it up a little bit. Let me change the mood up a little bit. When I look at the players, I mean, and this is difficult. It's difficult to look at this entire team and pick a player of the season. That's the reason for him having a good season that he did is his new role that he picked up. And that's because, Thomas Partey came in and he can cover. However, all the other players around him were also firing.
Yeah.
Gabriel Martinelli's, the Sakas, the Reece Nelsons, So if I were to think about it and the impact that this player has had throughout the entire season, Captain Odegaard. I think he had such a improved season from last year.
He did,
We often talked about him going missing. I can call a few games where I feel like he went missing a little bit, but that was very rare this season. And his goals, his assists this season has really is part of why we're second. The additional goals and stuff that he's been able to contribute this season has been phenomenal for the team. And I think he's such a good captain. I mean, we may not be privy to what's going on in between in the hallways and in one-on-one conversations and all of that, but what I see on the pitch is all I can judge from. And I see him really, he constantly moving, he constantly attacking the ball, and off the ball he's been really good this season. So I give him praise for that. So my player of the season, Martin.
Yeah, it's difficult to overlook Odegaard because he, like you said, he sets the tone in our press. When we're looking to win the ball in the opponent's final third, he's got over 20 goals and assists to his name, and as captain, he's been a leader in that sense in both of those areas, among many others. And I think, back to when Arsenal were looking at who they should pick as captain. Once Aubameyang and Lacazette left, there were question marks over whether or not Odegaard should be captain, because he's not the most vocal. He's not a Tony Adams. He's not a Patrick Vieira. Captains of those people are gone. You don't get captains like that anymore. But he does it in a very different way. And everyone listens and everyone is on board with what he wants to do. So, it's difficult. And for me, it's between him and Bukayo Saka, because this season, when Arsenal have needed goals, when we've needed someone to step up as well when it's not always been Odegaard, when we've needed someone else to step up. It's been Bukayo Saka. We have to remember that he was the one who took the penalty against Liverpool as well at the Emirates. He has come up with vital goals against the likes of Manchester United when we beat them as well at the Emirates. He's a big game player. He scored goals, I think, against every top 6 team this season. And he's also one of our own as well, which just makes it that much sweeter. And what a way to end the campaign by signing a long-term contract, which sends a message not only to the Premier League in terms of the fact that this was not a flash-in-the-pan season. Arsenal looking to build a team for the future. So it's difficult. I don't know who to pick between Odegaard and Saka. I think for the sake of being different to everyone else on the panel, I'll go with Saka. And it'd be nice to hear what everyone else has to say in the chat on who your player of the season was and why. Chippy coming in here, agreeing with Neil as Odegaard for player of the season. And it's difficult to argue with either of you on either of your choices. And as you said, Neil, it could have been so many other players as well. Those are just 3 players that we spoke about. But, everyone has had their impact in a very, very, very different way. Sorry, go on, Neil.
Sorry for cutting you like that. But just let's put it like this way then. For us to be in the position that we're in and just to fall off the title race by 6 points or so, every player would have had to have a season of their life for us to be here. So, granted, we're choosing this, but it really is across the board. Each player in each position, even on the bench, because when he called upon the bench at certain times, there were players that came off the bench that actually made very good impacts. So, player of the season all around. Sprinkle it. Share it.
It is. It really, really, really is. And when you look at the fact that Arsenal don't have the squad depth of a Manchester City, those first 11, 12, 13 players, if you want to call it that, like they all have to be playing like 8 out of 10 every single week. So you're absolutely spot on with sharing that praise across the team. But that is going to about wrap things up for the Arsenal season review. A little bit different to probably what you've seen elsewhere on YouTube with people rating players out of 10 and their favorite games and their favorite goals. Wanted to do things a little bit differently to everyone else in sharing their opinions. I've been joined by Neil and Tony. Thank you both so much for your time this evening. They both have Twitter accounts where they often share their opinions on Arsenal football and hobbies alike. Their details are down in the description below. If you have enjoyed today's show, please do hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here. But for now, this is the Arsenal Analyze team. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and we'll catch you next week, Sunday. Bye for now.